My family took advantage of me for years. You won't believe what happened when I stopped paying their bills. Tricked into buying a house for my sister, I finally stopped being the family's financial lifeline and reclaimed control over my life. This story has been consuming me for months, and I need to share it. It's about how my parents deceived me into purchasing a house for them, only to hand it over to my younger sister Mia, and what happened when I finally reached my breaking point. Be warned, this is a long and complex tale of financial manipulation, family betrayal, and ultimately, standing up for myself. Growing up, my family was always struggling to keep their finances balanced. We weren't poor, but there was constant tension surrounding money. My dad fancied himself a serial entrepreneur, though none of his ventures ever really took off. He was always chasing the next big thing, jumping from job to job. One month he'd be selling life insurance, convinced that was his path to success, and the next he'd be trying to start a home renovation business, despite having no experience in the field. Each new pursuit followed the same pattern: initial excitement, growing frustration, and eventual failure. My mom, 55, ever the optimist, supported every one of his decisions. I remember her telling us at dinner, "Your father is a visionary," right after he had abandoned yet another stable job to dive into a risky project. "He just needs one big break, and everything will be fine." Meanwhile, she worked part-time jobs, but her main job seemed to be maintaining the illusion of normalcy, even though our financial reality was far from it. Mia and I had very different experiences. From a young age, I was expected to be the family's savior, the key to a brighter future. Every decision I made was filtered through that lens. I remember when I was 14 and wanted to join the school band, my parents had a serious talk with me, telling me that joining the computer club would look better on my college applications instead of supporting my passion for music. My sister Mia, on the other hand, seemed to have free rein. She did whatever she pleased. One month my parents paid for her art classes, and the next it was dance lessons, allowing her to follow whatever whim caught her interest. In high school, the pressure on me intensified. I maintained a 4.0 GPA, not because I was naturally gifted, but because I had no choice. After I got an A in AP Physics one semester, my dad barely spoke to me for days, only commenting on how I couldn't afford to be mediocre if I was to support my family. "Teenagers need to express themselves," my mom said dismissively when Mia skipped school for days to hang out with her friends. Mia was finding herself, while I was suffocating under the weight of expectations. I was meant to create a blueprint for financial success, while Mia went through life largely unscathed, without any real responsibility. Mia would sneak in after curfew without any consequences, while I spent my nights studying into the early hours, fueled by anxiety and energy drinks. Our lives couldn't have been more different. Mia's academic struggles were explained away with, "The traditional school system just doesn't suit her," while my B+ in calculus prompted an entire family discussion about my declining standards. When college came around, my parents made it clear that my only choice was to attend technical school, not because it aligned with my interests, they never asked about those, but because it was the quickest route to a stable, well-paying job. They constantly reminded me of their sacrifices, taking out loans, depleting their savings. My mom often said, "We're eating ramen so you can have a future." Yet there was always money for Mia's latest hobby or adventure. Technical school was grueling, not only because of the challenging coursework, but also because of the constant pressure from home. I survived on the cheapest food, worked part-time at a computer repair shop between classes, and was frequently reminded of my parents' financial investment in me. Every phone call from them was a reminder of their struggles and subtle hints about when I would be able to pay them back. Meanwhile, Mia dropped out of high school during her senior year. My parents actually celebrated her decision, claiming it was brave. "Not everyone is cut out for school," they said. "She's brave for following her own path." She spent the following years hopping from one part-time job to another: barista, retail clerk, dog walker, yoga instructor trainee, quitting whenever she felt unfulfilled. Every new job was hailed as her true calling. After I graduated from tech school, I was hired by a growing tech startup. The pay wasn't impressive by industry standards, but it was more than my family had ever made. I remember calling my parents to share the good news, hoping for a moment of pure joy. But instead, my dad immediately started calculating how much I could contribute to them each month, while my mom made a list of bills they needed help with. Eventually, our office space blocked the doorway on the CX 5200. As followers, I awaited the next report of burglaries and other charges and moved into a small apartment with 2 roommates. It wasn't much, but I was earning enough to eventually buy my own home. Still, I lived frugally to support my parents, sending them money each month to help with their bills. But it was never enough. My dad would call, his voice dripping with guilt, telling me how much they had sacrificed for my education. If I missed sending an extra payment one month, he would lay on the guilt trip thick. At work, I threw myself into projects, earning a reputation for solving difficult problems and advancing within the company. Each bonus or promotion should have been a victory, but they only added to the pressure. So now you can help us more, right? Was always the question, never, are you proud of yourself or what are your goals? Mia's pattern of hopping from job to job continued. Whenever things didn't work out, she'd move back home or take a break from school. Our parents would cheer her on, saying, "She's still young, she just hasn't found her calling yet." What I thought would be just another typical Sunday dinner at their rental apartment turned out to be the turning point. Although I had been picking up more signs than usual about their financial struggles, I wasn't prepared for what happened next. After all these years of putting everything into the family's future, Dad began talking about how tired they were of renting, how the landlord was raising the rent again, and how they desperately needed a home of their own. Even though I could sense where this was going, the directness of it still took me by surprise. "Honey, we've been thinking," Mom said, reaching across the table to hold my hand. "We've sacrificed so much for you to get here, and you're doing so well now. Don't you think it's time to help us buy a house?" It was as if they had been holding back years of guilt, waiting for this moment. When I admitted that I was barely able to pay my own rent and save for the future, Dad started talking about how they could have put that money into supporting me instead of saving for retirement. Mom began crying, saying that all they wanted in their final years was some stability. Mia, who was living with them at the time, claiming I was living comfortably while they were struggling. The pressure campaign continued over the next few months. They casually mentioned houses they had seen during every phone call. Dad would tell stories about friends' kids who had bought houses for their parents, and Mom would email me listings to look at. Mia even started sending me messages saying that after everything our parents had done for me, they deserved this one thing. Despite my best efforts, I wasn't immune to their manipulation after all these years of being conditioned. The guilt started to overwhelm me. Their age, their sacrifices, and their need for stability kept me up at night. Though I had started seeing a therapist, yes, I finally made that decision. She kept reminding me about setting boundaries. But after months of mental and emotional struggle, I finally gave in. I convinced myself that it was the right thing to do, even though I had saved up a decent amount for a down payment, money that should have gone toward my own future. I promised myself that once they had a home, the guilt trips would end. They'd be happy, and then I could focus on my own life. So I bought a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't anything fancy, but I figured I could manage the mortgage payments if I lived simply and kept roommates. For the first few months, everything seemed fine. My parents were thrilled, telling everyone how proud they were of me, showing off their new house. But instead of the pressure easing, it only grew. They wanted to landscape the backyard because the neighbors would judge us, and they needed new furniture because the old stuff didn't fit the house. Each request came with the same guilt-laden refrain. "After everything we've done for you." I kept paying the mortgage, sending extra when I could, hoping to pay it off faster. I convinced myself that it was worth it to give my parents the security they had never had, even if I was still living with roommates and putting my own life on hold. They began talking about how nice it would be if Mia had a place nearby, and how she was helping them settle in, but I ignored the red flags. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. I had spent so many years putting their needs first that I didn't notice the warning signs. What happened next forced me to face the harsh reality of my family's dynamics and make one of the toughest decisions of my life. For years by now, Mason and my son Andrew had witnessed how much the Cups had paid their bills and their attitudes toward me. Update 1. What happened when I decided to make an unexpected visit to the house I bought? I wish I could say I was blindsided by what I found, but deep down I had an inkling this kind of thing was coming. It all started on a weekend when I tried calling my parents to discuss the additional mortgage payments I'd been making. They never missed a chance to talk about money, so it struck me as odd when neither of them answered. I tried again, then decided to drive over to the house. Everything changed that day. When Mia answered the door, she was wearing pajamas as if she owned the place. There was no greeting, no "it's good to see you," just a slightly annoyed "what are you doing here?" as though I were interrupting her day. As I stood there, trying to process what I was seeing, I felt a wave of nausea. The entire house had been transformed into Mia's personal space. Her portraits were hanging on the walls where family photos used to be. Her clothes were strewn across the furniture, and her art supplies covered the table that had once been our parents' dining table. She was apparently a budding social media influencer now, and the spare room had been turned into some kind of studio for her latest creative business venture. "Where are Dad and Mom?" I asked, trying to stay calm. She casually responded, "Oh, they moved out a few weeks ago. They found a nice rental across town. Didn't they tell you?" Of course, they hadn't told me. No one thought to mention that Mia had moved in and that my parents had left. Even though I had been making extra payments on this house, I felt blindsided by the betrayal. I called my parents while sitting on the couch, now covered with Mia's throw pillows. Mom finally answered, and her explanation only fueled my anger. "We were planning to tell you, honey. We thought this would be a good setup for Mia. She needed a stable place to focus on her career, and you're doing so well now. She just needs time to figure things out." Mom's voice shifted into that familiar, guilt-ridden tone when I dared to remind her that I was the one making the mortgage payments. "Can't you help your sister? After everything we've done for you, your extra payments will just cover our new rent. It's still within the family." That was the breaking point. Within the family? I didn't buy this house so Mia could have a free place to crash. I bought it for you and Dad. And now, without telling me, you're using my extra payments to cover your rent, trying to manipulate me. Mom broke down, sobbing, calling me selfish and saying that family was supposed to help one another. Shortly after I landed my IT job, Dad called me up to lecture me about how I had changed, how I had become materialistic. The real kicker? The majority of their furniture had already been moved to their new rental, leaving Mia with the newer pieces I had helped them purchase for the house. I was in reality the one paying the bill, and they had orchestrated this entire situation without ever informing me. "I'm building my brand right now," Mia said, nonchalantly. When I confronted her about her lack of contribution to the mortgage, she shrugged and replied, "I'll be able to help out once I get my social media following up," as she unpacked a brand new ring light, no doubt purchased with the extra funds I had been contributing toward the mortgage. As I drove home, I was caught in a whirlwind of anger and disbelief. The years of guilt trips, the family first lectures, the emotional manipulation. It was all a ploy to keep me paying the bills while my life was put on hold. I've given myself a few days to calm down, to gather my thoughts before deciding what to do next. Part of me wants to cut off all payments immediately and let them face the consequences, but I've also been conditioned to fear being the bad son who leaves his family behind. One thing, however, is clear. This cannot continue. I've had enough of being the family ATM. This weekend, I've scheduled a meeting with my parents to set some hard boundaries. Mia either starts paying her fair share of the mortgage, or things need to change. I'll update you afterward, but I have a feeling it won't go well. My parents are masters of emotional manipulation, and I know they're already preparing their defense. But, for the first time in my life, I'm ready to stand my ground. Even if it means becoming the villain in their narrative, I can't help but notice the irony. My sister is living rent-free in a house I'm paying for, while I'm still sharing a room with her. I sometimes wonder how things got this far, but I guess that's what happens when you're manipulated and guilted by your family for years. Update 2. Things didn't go as planned when I confronted my parents. In fact, it turned out far worse than I anticipated. Let me walk you through what became one of the most excruciating family gatherings I've ever endured. When I arrived at their new rental, I immediately noticed how much more expensive it was than their previous place. A large TV greeted me as soon as I stepped inside, along with new furniture. I could now clearly see where my extra mortgage payments had been going. It seemed they had carefully planned this meeting to coincide with a family dinner, probably hoping that I wouldn't protest while food was involved. Looking back, I should have seen this coming. But what I hadn't expected was that Mia would be there too. She was never supposed to be part of this conversation. Before I could even bring up the issue with the house, my parents sprang into action. Mom, who had made my favorite childhood meal, an obvious play to tug at my emotions, immediately started discussing simpler times and how family had always been everything. I tried to steer the conversation back to the real issue at hand. We need to talk about Mia's living situation in the house. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Mom put her fork down. Dad's face hardened. Mom's phone buzzed. And Mia, curious as always, stopped what she was doing to listen. Look, I began, struggling to keep my composure. I bought that house for you and Dad, but now that you've moved out and given it to Mia, you're using my extra money to pay your rent. I wasn't informed about any of this, and it needs to stop. Dad immediately went on the offensive. So now you're keeping score after everything we've done for you? He pulled out a notebook. Yes, an actual notebook, and began reading off a list of every expense they had ever covered for my education. Should we talk about what we spent on your tech school? He asked, clearly trying to guilt-trip me further. Mom, ever the performer, began to cry, her tears almost immediate. We thought you'd understand. Mia is struggling to find her path, and we just want both of our children to succeed. Isn't that what family's for? To support each other? I'm really focusing on my social media right now. I gained 200 followers this month. The house makes the perfect backdrop for my content. My lifestyle influencer career is about to take off, Mia chimed in, barely looking up from her phone as she tried to justify her actions. Mia, you're living rent-free in a house I'm paying for, and I'm still stuck with roommates. How is that fair? The words came out before I could stop them, and I couldn't believe the audacity of the situation. Not everything is about money, you know. You're so lucky with your tech job. You don't understand how hard it is for creative people like me, she said, rolling her eyes as if it were all just a joke. And then, just as I thought things couldn't get worse, Mom dropped the bombshell. She hesitantly mentioned that they'd already gotten quotes for a makeover and were planning to let Mia turn the garage into a content creation studio, expecting me to foot the bill. Enough. This stops now. Either Mia starts contributing to the mortgage or we need to find a new arrangement, I said, my patience finally snapping. Dad slammed his hand on the table. We put you through school. We sacrificed everything for your success, and now you're going to deny your sister the same opportunity? The same opportunity? I laughed bitterly. This isn't about opportunities, it's about responsibility. Mia dropped out of high school and has never worked for more than 3 months. How can you be so blind to this? We raised you better than this. Mia needs stability to pursue her dreams, Mom sobbed, as if this were a justification for everything. And what about my dreams? I shouted. I've sacrificed everything for this family, my own dreams, my future, living with roommates, saving for the future, and paying for a house I don't even get to live in. From that point, the conversation spiraled. Dad recounted every sacrifice they'd ever made for me. Mom continued to cry, claiming she had given everything for the family. And Mia, as always, accused me of being jealous of her supposed future success. The situation was as painful as it was surreal, and I knew this was just the beginning. Starting next month, I've made it clear I'm only paying the base mortgage, nothing extra. I finally gave them an ultimatum. If Mia wants to stay in the house, she has to contribute. Otherwise, we need to sell it. Mom immediately started complaining that I was tearing the family apart. Dad called me materialistic and ungrateful, and Mia stormed out, accusing me of ruining her career before it even began. You'd think I had suggested burning down an orphanage. As I drove home, I couldn't help but reflect on all the years I had spent trying to meet their expectations, all the sacrifices I had made, and the guilt I had carried. For the first time, it hit me just how manipulative they had been. I left that night feeling exhausted, but strangely liberated. Dad bombarded me with angry texts about my betrayal. Mia posted vague updates about toxic family members and dealing with haters. Mom, on the other hand, kept calling, leaving tearful voicemails about how they couldn't afford their rent without my help. I've already contacted the bank to stop the extra payments, and I'm not backing down. He continued, looking predictably at the backs of her hands as she spoke about her improving situation. For too long, I've been the family's ATM, putting everyone else's needs before my own. But not anymore. If they can't see that, I might have to take even stronger action. For the first time in my life, I'm willing to put myself first, even if that means becoming the villain in their narrative. But I have a feeling this isn't over yet. Update 3. Let me explain how everything finally unraveled and where I stand now. After that last conversation, I made the hardest decision of my life. I stopped making any mortgage payments altogether. My phone exploded. In the first week, I got 47 calls from Mom, 23 from Dad, and countless messages from Mia across every social media platform. I blocked them all, but they didn't give up. They got creative, using friends' phones, creating new social media accounts, and even reaching out to relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. "I can't sleep knowing my son has abandoned us," was the first guilt trip message I received in Mom's voicemail. "We'll lose everything because of you," followed closely behind. Dad's messages were more combative. "No son of mine would do this to his family," he wrote. Then there was Mia's relentless social media campaign, sharing stories about toxic family members ruining dreams on a regular basis. The most surreal part came when I checked Mia's Instagram. I saw that she was charging $50 per session for insights into the influencer lifestyle, all while hosting creativity classes in the very house I was still paying for. She used my financial struggles as a way to engage with her followers, turning the living room into a content creation space. By week 3, the bank sent their first notice. My parents forwarded it to me with a single pointed message. "Is this what you want? To see your family homeless?" I archived the email without responding. Then, the so-called flying monkeys started appearing. Family friends I hadn't spoken to in years called me, expressing their disappointment. According to a long message from my aunt, I was destroying my parents' golden years. Even my old high school teacher reached out on Facebook, concerned about the changes in my life. None of them knew that I had started therapy and was finally recovering from years of emotional and financial abuse. It was my therapist who helped me realize that my family had created a situation where I was responsible for everyone's well-being, except my own. Mia's Rise Above Surviving Family Betrayal podcast, which was recorded in the house I bought, was the tipping point. The first episode was all about her supposed struggle with her wealthy tech bro brother, claiming I was jealous and trying to sabotage her career, and she managed to gather a modest following from people who sympathized with her plight. By the second month, the bank's notices became more serious. My parents switched tactics and sent me pictures of houses they were considering, homes that were far less expensive than their current rental. Mom texted from a different number. See, we're trying to compromise. But I could tell Mia still hadn't been asked to contribute, nor had she been asked to find a place of her own. Then Mia posted a farewell to my dream space broadcast, complete with dramatic monologues about overcoming adversity in response to the looming foreclosure. She even launched a GoFundMe page for her emergency relocation fund, conveniently leaving out the fact that she had never contributed to the mortgage. Finding out that Mia had been renting out one of the rooms in the house to another content creator and keeping the money for herself was the final straw. This came after a tearful phone call from Mom claiming they couldn't make any mortgage payments. Mia had to quickly move her business back into her parents' rental. When the bank eventually took ownership of the house, Mia made sure to record every moment for her followers, portraying herself as a victim of forces beyond her control. I found it ironic that she never once mentioned the real source of the house's funding, me. Dad made one last attempt to reach me. I answered, but his voice was low, almost resigned, not the anger I had expected. He said, "We really thought you'd cave. We never thought you'd actually let the house go." That one sentence told me everything I needed to know about how they saw me. They didn't view me as a son. They saw me as a cash machine, someone they could tap into whenever it suited them. The fallout has been both harder and easier than I imagined. It's harder because there's a void when you sever ties with your entire family, even if they're toxic. It's easier because, for the first time, I am only accountable to myself. I now live alone in my own apartment. It's small, but it's mine. Every decision I make is for my future, not to satisfy anyone else's needs or desires. Finally considering buying a home for myself, this time just for me. My savings are growing, and the family still tries to reach out. Mom sends guilt-ridden, passive-aggressive holiday cards. Dad emails me articles about ungrateful children. Mia, on the other hand, has remade herself as a trauma healing counselor. But I'm done. Selling the house wasn't just about unloading property, it was about breaking free from a lifetime of guilt and exploitation. I've come to realize that sometimes setting boundaries means playing the villain in someone else's story. It's never too late to stop burning yourself alive to keep others warm. If you're in a similar situation, the manipulation will be harder to bear than the guilt, but remember, it's your life. Don't wait as long as I did to figure that out. I want to thank everyone for their support and for sharing their own stories. Reading your comments has helped me realize that I'm not alone in facing financial exploitation from family. Your stories have been a source of strength, and I'm grateful for all the encouragement. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more real-life stories happening around you.